Hi, I'm Megan, the founder and CEO of ScootRoute. If you're new here, ScootRoute is a routing engine for micromobility. So if you think about or you're unfamiliar with micromobility, it's really anything that travels under 30 miles per hour. So it could be anywhere from a scooter to an e-bike to a bike. And what ScootRoute does is it creates the best route for these riders to take, whether or not they want to avoid main roads or utilize bike paths or bike lanes. And every day, as a micromobility or being a company in the micromobility space, we talk to a lot of different investors, other shared mobility providers, private device riders, and other tech founders. And so we love sharing our story. And ScootRoute solves some of these challenges that the micromobility industry faces. Typically, we do monthly webinars, but for this month, because we are having so many awesome conversations with these folks, we wanted to kind of highlight some of the frequently asked questions that we get regarding the micromobility industry. So the first one up is, how will micromobility play a role as companies roll out return to work solutions? And how does this differ with pre-COVID trends? So COVID was actually very good for micromobility. And it was kind of essential and very critical in getting a lot of the nurses and doctors to hospitals and essential workers where they needed to be, especially when, not a lot of people were taking public transportation. When it comes to more of the typical commuter or the private device riders, before COVID, micromobility was really considered the last mile solution. Now, because people are still avoiding some of these public transportation options, it's being considered the last 5 mile solution, which is really exciting. So who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it'll be the last 10 mile solution, we'll see. And when it comes to private device riders, there's been a major boom in micromobility, especially when it comes to bike and e-bike sales. So for example, between 2019 and 2020, bike sales rose 65%. And then in that same exact period, e-bike sales grew 145%. So I think we can we'll continue to see these numbers rise, not only for bikes and e-bikes, but in the electric kick scooters and electric mopeds as well. The next question is, and we get this too, is when we think about micromobility, and shared providers like Bird, Lime, and Spin. Those are the companies that immediately come to mind. But outside of the shared mobility providers, who else is using electric vehicles, and how big is this opportunity? So the market is actually much, much bigger than just the shared providers. So if you think about, who is using micromobility, drivers for Grubhub or Uber Eats, a lot of them are using micromobility to make their deliveries to their clients. And a lot of delivery services, not just Grubhub and Uber Eats, but postal workers are using micromobility as well, potentially even Amazon Prime. So for example, DHL acquired 12,000 e-bikes in Germany to help deliver their packages. We're also seeing a huge expansion of micromobility on major corporate campuses because there could potentially be a long walk from building to building. So a lot of companies are starting to work with these shared providers to have scooters on campus. We're also seeing micromobility in some of the shared apps like Move It and Transit, where you used to just see bus times and train times, but now you're seeing an option for micromobility and where is the closest scooter for you and how long is it going to take you to get to where you need to be. Another exciting kind of opportunity here too is on college campuses. A lot of the major campuses, now that students are back after a year of taking classes from home, they are either starting a new micromobility program on campus or starting it up again. And so so we're seeing a lot of uses there. Just in terms of the general market, right now in the US, it's a $2.6 billion market. Globally, it's about a $4.5 billion market. And according to a recent McKinsey study, it could be between $300 to $500 billion market by 2030 globally, which is outrageous. Okay, so the next one, and I kind of talked about it a little bit already, is most college campuses are welcoming students back and are consequently bringing their mobility programs. What are we seeing on campuses, and how could ScootRoute be a solution for universities? So it's so exciting, and that college campuses are kind of back into full swing. I think people are starting to get back to normal life. But with that, micromobility wreaks a little bit of havoc on these college campuses. So students and faculty, but probably mostly students, leave the scooters where they shouldn't, whether or not they're supposed to leave it at a charging spot, or they could potentially be using roadways or paths that school doesn't want them to be riding on. So what ScootRoute is able to do is really to be able to change that user behavior and make it very easy for riders to know where they should and should not be riding on campus, as well as where they should be parking. Okay, so the next question is, we've seen mobility providers integrating with transit apps like Move It and BestMap. And what does this mean for the industry, and how can ScootRoute play a role? I mean, I think this is huge for the industry. It is so exciting to see. It really allows users to create a multimodal experience, so they can take, a bus or a train for the majority of their journey, and then wrap it up with a micromobility device. I feel like the old saying of trains, planes, and automobiles, that is now maybe planes, trains, automobiles, and scooters. And so what ScootRoute can do, by integrating with these multimodal apps, is create the routing for micromobility, so you know exactly how long it's going to take you to get somewhere, whether or not you're getting to a train or off of a bus to your final destination. The next question that we've seen is, and this is the final question, is outside of what's already been discussed, what are some of the major trends in the electrical vehicle space, and what are we seeing? So we're seeing a lot in terms of the bigger companies, the bigger brands like Bird and Lime. They're expanding their fleet. So where Bird used to just be the typical electric kick scooter, they now have e-bikes. Lime has moved into mopeds. So Lime has multiple different types of transportation options. Hellbiz now has a lifestyle brand. So they are really definitely expanding past just the typical, electric kick scooter. And then I also think that there's going to be a lot in terms of, and one of the biggest barriers, or the biggest kind of issues with micrmobility, it is where these drivers should and should not be riding. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot of changes into geofencing and to improve the customer's experience. I think that a lot of the local cities are going to start playing a big part in terms of implementing those rules. I think in terms of like Internet of Things, it's not going to be just the scooter companies, the hardware companies. It's going to be, you're going to see a lot of innovation when it comes to sidewalk detection, and are these scooters riding on the sidewalk? Should they be riding on the sidewalk? How do we alert them? So I think that, now that micromobility is becoming a lot more mainstream, we're going to see a whole host of really cool stuff coming down the pipe. So those are kind of the big ones the big questions or the big discussion topics that we usually have during these sessions or during our meetings. Hope that you found this helpful. I'm excited about micromobility and where it's going, and I hope you are too.